Senior Iranian sources tell Reuters Tehran wants something very specific in the middle of this ceasefire: international recognition of its control over Hormuz and the right to charge ships for passing through. If you're just joining, quick recap. The maritime fight started with wartime pressure around Hormuz and the Red Sea. After the interim ceasefire, it turned into an implementation fight: safe passage, insurance confidence, and who actually controls transit. And the IRGC has claimed strikes on U.S. military positions after American attacks on Iranian coastal areas, so shipping is still tied straight into the wider escalation.
This is Iran War Daily. Iran wants the world to sign off on a toll booth in the world's busiest oil choke point. And the U.S. team in Doha hasn't said a word back. Let's get into who eats the bill. Hormuz to Red Sea maritime escalation isn't over. Follow us wherever you're listening, and the next chapter comes to you.
Here's CTV News.
Dubai, United Arab Emirates. 2 U.S. envoys arrived in Qatar on Tuesday for talks with mediators about the implementation of an initial deal to end the war in Iran, an official said. The visit by Steve Witkoff, U.S. President Donald Trump's special Mideast envoy, and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, comes after a weekend of crossfire in the Persian Gulf over efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to shipping traffic.
The setup, per the Associated Press: Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner landed in Doha Tuesday. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesman Majid al-Ansari was explicit: these are not direct talks. Mediators are shuttling between the two sides. No high-level Iranian officials are in the room.
So the two Americans sent to reopen Hormuz aren't even in the same room as the Iranians. Al-Ansari calls them technical meetings. Technical meetings while there's crossfire in the Gulf over that exact strait. That's a generous phrase.
And al-Ansari himself points to the history here. The two previous rounds of indirect talks both collapsed into war. He's saying the meetings haven't stopped, which is a pretty low bar when the last two rounds ended in strikes.
Kushner and Witkoff walk in to sort out shipping, and there's a weekend of live fire in the Persian Gulf as the backdrop. Nobody's put a Lloyd's premium number on what that crossfire is doing to tanker insurance yet. And that's the number the whole strait runs on.
SRN News, with Parisa Hafezi, Jonathan Saul, and Angus McDowell.
Dubai, London, July 1st, Reuters. Iran is determined to win international recognition of its control over the Strait of Hormuz and ability to levy fees on ships entering or leaving the Gulf, even if it has to do so by force, 2 senior Iranian sources said.
There it is. Reuters citing 2 senior Iranian sources. Iran doesn't just want to control who passes through Hormuz. It wants the world to legally recognize its right to charge for it. A toll booth on a fifth of the world's traded oil.
And notice where it's coming from. Not the foreign ministry, not the IRGC on the record. 2 senior sources talking to Reuters before anything gets signed in Doha. That's a deliberate signal, meant to cut through the noise.
Here's the part that changes the ceasefire. The sources say negotiators won't move to any other issue until Washington accepts this. Everything else, nuclear talks, hostages, proxies, gets frozen behind one demand about a waterway.
Here's the maritime update. The fight over safe passage has quietly turned into a fight over Iranian control and future fees. Under the interim deal, ships pass free for 60 days, but Iran reads the wording as still letting it pick which ships and which route.
And if the deal isn't extended, they start charging in mid-August. No fee schedule, no numbers. Nobody's put a $1 per barrel figure on this yet, and that cost lands on Gulf exporters, Asian importers, and eventually the pump.
Let's separate one point. The U.S. envoys are in Doha, but there's still no American response on the record to this Hormuz demand. Tehran's position is public. Washington's answer isn't. Here's Parisa Hafezi, Jonathan Saul, and Angus McDowell at WDEZ 101.9 FM, Great Country.
Any lasting Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, with formalities and fees for ships, would add costs, delays, and risks to all shipping through a waterway that, before the war, transported a fifth of global energy supplies, plus other critical goods.
Okay, here it is in black and white. Iran wants international recognition of its control over Hormuz and the right to charge ships for passage. That's the toll booth I've been waiting to see them admit to, and two senior Iranian sources just said it to Reuters.
And look at the sourcing. Parisa Hafezi's byline, two senior Iranian sources. Not the Foreign Ministry, not the IRGC on the record. That is a signal meant to land, and it changes what Doha is even negotiating.
It changes everything. Their negotiators reportedly won't touch any other dispute. Nuclear, sanctions, none of it, until Hormuz control is agreed. So Witkoff's team flies to Qatar to reopen the strait and gets handed a demand to legally bless Iran, taxing every tanker that moves through it. Who at that table even has authority to discuss that?
And here's the escalation point. The interim deal gave 60 days of free passage, and it expires in mid-August. If it lapses, Iran starts charging. No fee schedule, no collection method, but the intent is now formal, and it's permanent, not the 30-day posture we heard earlier.
Mid-August is the number nobody's pricing. A fifth of the world's traded oil moves through that strait. Put a per-barrel transit fee on it and somebody eats it. Gulf exporters, Asian refiners, or you at the pump. Nobody's answered that yet, and for the real economy, it's the question that matters.
Have thoughts on today's briefing? A story idea we should track, or a correction? Send us a note at iranworddaily@lanternpodcasts.com. We read every message, and your feedback helps sharpen the show. What we're watching next is mid-August. If the interim deal expires without an extension, Reuters' Iranian sources say Iran would begin charging ships for passage through Hormuz. You'll find links to every story we covered today in the show notes, so if one caught your ear, you can go straight to the source. That's Iran War Daily for today. This is a Lantern Podcast.